In 1985, Nintendo released Super Mario Bros. To make a very long story short, the game was popular. So popular that making a sequel was a no-brainer. Said sequel was released in Japan the next year, and when the time came around to send this new game to the American market, they absolutely hated it! A few years later, a game named Super Mario Bros. 2 would come to the West, but it wasn't the one Japanese players knew. From that moment on, there would forever be two games called Mario 2, and this is a video about them. This one is gonna make someone mad, I can already feel it. Welcome back to the Mario Marathon, where I talk about games older than me in a vain attempt to pretend like I'm one of the cool kids. Today we're talking about Mario 2, both versions of it in fact. It's not that I didn't want to talk about each of these in their own videos, it's just that discussion between the two versions is relevant enough to justify grouping them together. We're definitely going to stay here for longer than last time, that's for sure, so here are some timestamps for you. Where does one even start with Lost Levels?
I got one for you. Lost Levels is a horrible game that has terrible level design. It's just as bad as Kaiser with its hidden blocks, brutal enemy placement. It's a disgrace to all Mario games. It deserves to rot for all eternity in the bowels of wherever it is that bad games go. How can anyone possibly have anything good to say about it?
Hold your horses, man, in the back. It sounds suspiciously like me. I actually like Lost Levels more than Mario USA. Let me explain. It's my personal opinion. You hear that? Opinion. I know some of you don't know what that word means, and frankly that's terrifying, but why does my take on a nearly 40-year-old game matter to anyone in the first place? If you hate this game, cool. More power to you. In fact, go ahead and tell me how much you hate in the comics. I'll take the engagement. But, in my opinion, I don't think this game is nearly as hard as anyone says it is. Is it harder than your average Mario game? Sure. But to call it Kaizo? I'm sorry, I just don't see it. But to get into how Lost Levels actually isn't that bad, we need to look at the game itself and see what it's actually trying to accomplish. Lost Levels is by definition an asset flip, a time-honored tradition of reusing crap you already made to get a sequel out as quickly as possible. Usually. With that in mind, the game plays nearly identically to Mario 1. I say nearly because there are some changes you probably don't care about. For one, the physics for when you jump on enemies eventually leading to some mildly terrifying leaps of faith. There's also this dude. For reasons I don't know, they decided to take out the two-player mode from Mario 1 and replace it with the ability to play as Luigi instead of Mario, with his now iconic low traction and higher jump. How to put this lightly. I don't like playing as Luigi. In later games, his weirder controls are more manageable, but these early not Mario 1 physics make controlling him more trouble than it's worth, leading to him to get thrown to the wayside with him not gaining specific control differences until like the advanced games, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Lost Levels takes the whole direct sequel approach in the most literal way possible, and the easiest way to see that is with the game's difficulty. From the very start, the game was designed to appeal to players who had already mastered the original. Less of a true sequel and more Super Mario Bros. For super players. Oh hey, would you look at that? I get the feeling the reason why most people complain about this game is that when you think of World 1 of a Mario game, you think of the simple levels that don't punish the players. Nice open areas with very little danger. Maybe a place to experiment with some of the new power-ups. They probably aren't expecting Mario to get poisoned in the game demo. But say you took Lost Levels 1-1 and placed it after Mario 1's 8-4, all of a sudden, that makes more sense. When you compare it to any other Mario game, some of the level design as early as World 2 can feel like a bit much. But when you treat the game as a continuation of the previous one, the difficulty kind of feels more justified. I mean, you've already been in 8 worlds. Speaking of which, I have no idea what this game's actual story is since, like, it was only released in Japan for a while there. I'm assuming Bowser just crawls out of a lava pit and goes, "No fair, I want to redo," and just runs away with Peach again? What was that voice? Besides just being harder, the game is also a decent bit longer than Mario 1 as well. Granted, the whole rush to 8-4 is still the same, but there's actually 5 bonus worlds this time, starting with World 9 because that one is easy to explain. Much like the first game, there's these things called warp zones. You jump in one and it takes you into a different world. Not only are getting to these things way more convoluted than before, there's also warp zones that send you backwards. I'm starting to see why people have trust issues. Anyways, if you play through the game without using warps, you get taken to World 9 after beating the game. You also only start with 1 life, but the game does specify this is a special world. At the end of the world, you see Japanese that I've been advised by my lawyer to not try and speak for various reasons. After that, it loops back to 9-1 and you keep going until you lose your sanity or decide to end it all, with a unique game over message for reaching this far. This whole world is a throwback to the minus world glitch of the original, more specifically the Famicom disc version of Mario 1, because you needed to know that existed. This is also why instead of the endless water loop most people are familiar with, you're swimming around with ground textures with the watercolor palette. As for the other 4 worlds, chances are the majority of people that even played them in the All-Stars port. The letter worlds, A through D. If you're playing All-Stars, you automatically go to A1 after 9-4 or 8-4 if you're a cheater. And the original, you have to beat the game 8 times in a whole day when you start a new game. I don't know what you're talking about. Keeping track of how many times I played the game is way more important than the save feature. I've only played through these worlds a handful of times, mainly because a decent chunk of the levels are normal levels taken from the first 8 worlds, but harder. Like, I have no idea how you're supposed to avoid getting hurt here. If there was ever a point where you could say the game is actually hard, yeah, now would actually be a good time to do that. Look, I give this game a lot of slack, too much according to most people. I already know I've alienated at least 90% of the Mario fan base, but considering these worlds are locked behind beating the game 8 times, all I'm saying is anyone who played these were going in looking for pain, and that's not a problem with the game. So, do I think Lost Levels is a good game? On a technicality, yes. Look, I'm not trying to tell people that they can't hate the game for petty reasons. I'm just saying they're petty. Like, direct sequels are pretty common, some good, some not so good, but at the end of the day, it's just as well put together as Mario 1. It's not a bad game by any definition, but you don't need to beat the game to be a Mario expert or anything. That being said, if you do want to play it for whatever reason without abusing save states and rewind, just get as many extra lives as you can as 1-1. The game is way less stressful when you can throw yourself into something over and over again without worrying about a game over. It's what I do, at least for the Famicom original. It's obvious that Nintendo would eventually settle for an easy-to-play, hard-to-master approach, but we've got a while before we get there, so let's move on to Super Mario Bros. 2, the one with Birdo. And just a quick side tangent to let you know how fun it's been. This is being written on the 6th of August, like 3 weeks after the Lost Levels bit, because it's been over 100 degrees freedom every day for God knows how long. My brain is literally melting, someone please turn off the sun. Mario USA is the black sheep of the 2D Mario series. Unless you count these games, which opens a whole other can of worms on what is and what isn't a Mario game, if only someone made a video on that. Once upon a time, the Nintendo people made a game that had nothing to do with Mario, only for them to slap Mario's face on it and ship it abroad. You all know the story. Enough of the Doki Doki and onto the actual game. Mario 2U is unique for 2D Mario. Instead of a strict time limit and going left to right, we have unlimited time to go left, right, up, down, in any combination of these directions in search of the level's exit, which more often than not is guarded by Birdo. Birdo. Yeah, that's Mario 2's biggest contribution to the whole series. Despite being its own thing, a handful of enemies became series regulars. Bob-ombs, Phantos, technically at least, Ninjas, Pokies.
Move faster, Pokey!
Birdo, and most notably, Shy Guys. This game also has a cast of bosses called the 8-Bits, most notably Mouser, Triclod, and Fry Guy. These 3 all show up in the Mario Super Show, with Mouser usually being King Koopa's second in command, with the other 2 showing up sometimes. I don't remember if Cloglip shows up, and I'm too lazy to look it up. That's 2 videos in a row I've mentioned Super Show. Maybe I'll make a whole video on that someday. Probably not. Anyways, that leaves Wart, the frogman thing that is the cause of the whole mess in the first place. Alright, the story. For once, the story is actually told as in-game, so I don't have to go digging for the manual this time, but as far as the story goes, one night Mario dreamt of a mysterious staircase with a door to a mysterious land on the top of it. The next day, after a picnic with his friends or something I honestly don't remember, Mario finds the same staircase that he saw in his dream. After opening it, he, immediately fell to his death. Okay, obviously not to his death, but falling is the first thing you do when you start the game. This strange place you find yourself after cratering is Grusland, I mean Subcon, with its inhabitants, the Subcon, who were overthrown by a giant toad named Wart and his army, the 8-Bits. No, the actual frog kind for once. There we go. Apparently, Wart created all the game's enemies with the help of the Dream Machine, that thing that spits out the vegetables or something. Don't bother asking questions, I still don't fully understand it. Of course, all this nonsense goes out the window when you compare it to the original game and how it started out as a storybook or something. I don't know anymore. The whole game is based on dreams, so much so that the game itself is a dream. Spoilers for a 30-year-old game, by the way. That's still the best way I can describe this game in general. It's like a dream. The fact that it's so unique compared to almost any other Mario game makes it stand out as a weird fever dream. Well, at least until the actual fever dream comes out later this year. Think about it, there's no jumping on enemies' heads, no blocks, or even traditional power-ups. There's a health bar, weird tower levels, a mirror world that doubles as the game's warp zones. There's only 7 worlds instead of the usual 8. There's enemies that made their debut in the game that haven't seen the light of day since. Birdo! In hindsight, it's easy to see why this game ended up so different from the rest of the series. It's because it's not a Mario game. But still, back in the 80s, especially in America, when we didn't get the real Mario 2, it fit in way more. Plenty of sequels to iconic 80s titles were nothing like the original, Zelda 2, Dig Dug 2, whatever this is supposed to be. But that's enough talking about the idea of the game, now to talk about the actual game itself. Yeah, I don't like it that much. I mean, don't get me wrong, it plays fine enough, but it's kind of like when you go to the arcade as a kid and wanting to play Galaga and accidentally put money in Galaxian instead. It may not have happened to me, but it happened to my dad, which is close enough in my opinion. I think it comes down to the controls. They're definitely unique for Mario standards, and only half of it is Mario's fault. Much like the Japanese version, you can play as different characters, but unlike Lost Levels where you can only choose between Mario and Lewis, you now have the choice between them as well as Frog and Plum. How do I put this lightly? I don't like playing as Luigi. He takes everything I don't like about the controls and just makes it the star of the show. His jump is floaty, which in turn makes tight platforming a pain. He's the second weakest character in the game, which in contribution with his weird jump makes landing on Birdo's eggs way harder than it needs to be. His jump is the most powerful though, which lets you get away with stuff like this, so it's not all bad. Okay, Peach. Technically still Princess Toadstool, or just Princess if you don't have much time. Peach can float through the air after a jump, which can let you get away with things like this. I'm sensing a pattern here. Last on the list is Toad, who's bad at jumping because he doesn't have legs, but to make up for it, he's the fastest because he never skips leg day. And for programming sorcery, I don't understand he runs faster while carrying stuff. He's the speedrun character and my character of choice whenever I play this game. I know Luigi also jumped higher in Lost Levels, but I find it funny how the characteristics of Luigi and Peach's controls, the floating and whatever this is, were borrowed from Doki Doki Panic and kinda just stuck with them. I know I said earlier that I didn't like this game that much, but it's important to keep things in perspective. I don't like this game that much compared to most other Mario games, but as a 2D platformer on the NES, you could do a lot worse. At least that's what Nintendo thought, considering this game got a sequel. BS Super Mario USA. You sure we aren't talking about the Lost Levels? It was released on a Satellaview, an add-on for the Super Famicom that I don't have time to talk about. All that matters is that special audio dramas would be played during gameplay, which, to the best of my knowledge, isn't in any of the ROM dumps you can find online. I mean, still loaded onto super old consoles and Japanese thrift stores. Yes, obviously. Anyways, the Japanese version of All-Stars was broken up across several broadcasts, each one including remixed levels or something, at least that's what the wiki told me. BS Super Mario USA was a direct sequel to Mario USA, in which Wart comes back again and overthrows the King of Subcon. There's a king, by the way, don't know if I mentioned that earlier, somehow even more obscure than the Mushroom King, but hey, another one for the collection. The most confusing thing about all this is it brings into question the whole "it was Mario's dream" thing, which for the sake of the timeline theorist, I should probably try and wrap this up. So if I had to sum Super Mario Bros. 2 up in a sentence, one of these games is responsible for a lot of the weird crap in the series, and the other one is probably the reason why Mega Man 2 has an easy mode. Obviously, one of these games is looked upon more favorably, and while I might enjoy the raw difficulty of a hard Mario game, I do think Nintendo of America made the right choice in giving us the ROM hack. Can you imagine the Super Mario Bros. Super Show without the Mario 2 influence? Need some more Birdo.